You're listening to a special edition of the Outpost Podcast with Dr. Ray Mitch. Well, welcome everybody to the third special edition of the Outpost Podcast. We're talking about silent retreats, and it is an opportunity to introduce you to some people other than me that are experiencing the silent retreat in silence and solitude. And I want you to hear from the young people that are basically the target of what we're trying to accomplish in these silent retreats, and just realize that this is not something that this generation, if you want to categorize it or stereotype it, this generation does. Their lives are littered with noise and commotion and activity and comparisons and all manner of things. And so what we have oftentimes with our retreats is young people coming and experiencing something that they have never experienced before. In this particular edition, you're going to hear from two of our veterans. They have been with us the entire time in their undergraduate career in psychology. And so they have been doing a silent retreat, I believe, once or twice a year, all the way through. And so they have a little bit different take on some of the experiences and how students and young people look at this once they get introduced to it. And that's unique in and of itself. I think this is worth listening to because, like I said, this is the nature and the target of the people that we would like to introduce to these very ancient spiritual disciplines, and allow them the opportunity to learn through that, rather than having somebody tell them what they should think. And that's this. I say to my students all the time when they come, look, there's not a speaker for this retreat. The speaker is God, and the audience is you of one, not a bunch of other people. And so without further delay, let me introduce Abigail Guadagnola, and she has her own observations that I would like for you to be able to hear. And here she is. Okay, run.
All right. My name's Abigail. I graduated in 2020 in December, and this is my 6th silent retreat here at Sacred Heart. And I think what makes it so special is that it really is a place that is like none other. We often joke and call it Narnia. And I think that is a very apt description because it is a lot like the C.S. Lewis quote of further up and further in, and digging into yourself and finding this space of quiet. And I was journaling about it last night, and I was like, I think I often come to silent retreat and I really want this big mountaintop moment. And I think about, the winter camps I did in high school and how these were these awesome mountaintop moments. And I was thinking about it, and I was like, but those never lasted. They were these giant manufactured mountaintop moments, and they were great and they were fun, but they didn't create a lasting change. And I think the difference between something like that and something like this is that those aren't authentic, and this is genuinely coming and sitting in the silence and sitting in this space that is incredibly sacred. That's the irony of the name, is Sacred Heart. It is so sacred. And I think what we see in Scripture is that Jesus and God comes in the moments we don't expect, the things that we don't plan for. So we see, he wasn't in the fire, wasn't in the earthquake, wasn't in all of these things, but he came in the still small voice. And it's so easy in daily life to get super distracted, but to come to a place where it's like, you don't have a choice. You're quiet. Otherwise, you get a death glare. Not really, but you come into this space and it's like, oh, okay, like I'm here, and God really does love to show up in the ways that we don't expect. I think, like I said, everybody wants to have this giant mountaintop moment, and you leave and, oh, everything's so much better. My life is great. And that's not what it is. And I was thinking about it, of what I have to go back to, and going back to a place that is not something I would consider to be home, a job that kicks my butt quite frequently, and a lot of craziness and a lot of busyness. And Silent Retreat doesn't change that. But what it really does is give me the opportunity to come and sit. And whether it's the way I was kind of thinking about it last night, is it's almost like, originally I was thinking trench warfare is like life, and then Silent Retreat is like when you get pulled out for like reprieve. But that analogy didn't work totally well, so I'll put it in terms of like a hockey game, of this is like the break in between the periods, where you're back in the locker room, and it's either, your coach is telling you, okay, this is what needs to get fixed, like, let me bring this to your attention, or your coach is like, hey, you did great, like, take a minute and rest. And so, some retreats I've come on and I've been like, I'm gonna rest, and God's like, actually what you need to do is you need to start like working on, how do you view yourself? How do you view me? And other retreats like this one, I come in and I'm like, all right, here's my list. I have so many things I need to work out because my life is a mess. And God's like, no, actually, like, you've been running too hard, too fast for too long, and you need to pause. And it's an experience unlike any other. And I think why you would want to put yourself through that is to see what's on the other side. We talk about like the definition of insanity being doing the same thing over and over again. And so a lot of times I think we do the same thing. We go to church, we do the checklist. We can even talk about how we don't want to be checklist Christians, but we fall into the same patterns. And so this is doing something different. This is engaging in ancient spiritual traditions of, this is an Ignatian retreat house, it's Ignatian practices. And so it's so different, and it's checking out of social media and of like this ridiculous rat race where everywhere you go is so loud, and it's just this noise, and it gets really hard to hear. But you come into this space of silence and it's like, oh, I can breathe. And so I think that makes it special, and that's why you'd want to go, is it's a chance to just breathe and to be. And it's scary and it's horrifying. And this might be my 6th retreat, but there's still like that little bit of like anxiety where I'm like, I have to be quiet. I have to sit with my thoughts. And really what you come in face to face with is this perception you had of God and yourself, and then you come face to face with reality. And it's great because reality isn't the perception you have because you're looking through a warped lens. But that's just me. It's like when we talk about shame versus grace, and how shame will create this like quick change, and it does it for a time and it works for a time. And everyone wants that because it's quick, it's easy, it's a Band-Aid. But grace takes a lot longer, but it's lasting. But yeah.
Grace and growth.
Yeah.
So fun.
Always.
All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate your time. All right. Well, that is Abigail, and she had some interesting points to make, and I will underscore just a few of those. I think one of the things that stands out is the mythology that has grown up, at least around in CCU, about our silent retreats and the silent retreat house that we are hosted by. And it being very much like Narnia, it's ironic that our host, to get into their property, there is a narrow gate, and that has all the symbolism that you would expect, particularly from Scripture and Jesus talking about the narrow road. And so, and once you enter that, you have a very distinct feeling of you're entering another world, and a sacred world in a lot of ways. And I felt that from the very beginning with my first retreat, when I was given that as an assignment to go. And I felt like I walked onto the grounds and it was something other than the world that I normally knew. And that's exactly the context in which oftentimes I think our hearts end up being open to what God has to say to us, that he probably has been saying it all along, but we're distracted people, and it's very easy to get very distracted by it all. And going to a place like this, you're not going to find that by going off to the mountains by yourself and, going off the grid and not listening to anything and doing it in silence. There is a different, I think what the young people would call a different vibe about being at a place like this that has been inhabited by a lot of other people who have been on this journey as well. And I think oftentimes when we go off by ourselves and call that a silent retreat, it is a control mechanism of ours in an attempt to not have to be as vulnerable, because we always got an out, as we would be in the circumstances of this particular one. So the other thing I would underscore is really the very nature of what we do is really fundamentally very different than the typical protocol, if you will, of a silent retreat. Usually, the silent retreat is a very individual experience, and the reality is, it is, right? It's an individual journey, for sure. The thing is that when we're in a context with other people, God can speak not only in the silence, but he can also speak through other people's experiences. And that's what we get to hear when we do it in community and not alone, while at the same time being silent. And so that's just a few thoughts as a result of what you heard from Abigail. The next young woman is named Emily, and she will introduce herself and some of her experiences, and then I will close it up when we get to the end. So here is Emily.
My name is Emily. I graduated from CCU in the spring of 2020, and this is my 5th silent spiritual retreat through CCU. The first time I went on one, I think I was asking like the very similar question of, why would I do this? Like, why would I bother with this? This is ridiculous. Why would I go sit in silence on purpose? And I don't think that after that first retreat, I had quite put my finger on the answer. All I knew was that it was good and I wanted to do it again. And it took me maybe until like number 2 or 3 before I realized the reason why we do this is not, I don't think it's just as simple as like one thing, like we do this because it's good for us to be quiet. I wish it were that simple. Yeah. And that's true. It's good for us to be silent, especially like when we're in such a busy, hectic, intense life society where like hustle and the grind is glorified. Like that is the silence in itself is good, but I think we do it to meet ourselves as we are, face to face, so to speak, and not just to meet ourselves, but to meet others also face to face, and to be seen and to see others. And also to be met by God face to face and to see and I hesitate to say to allow him to see us as we are, because he already does that, but to stop trying to perform for him or hide or do any of the other number of things that we all like to do when it comes to facing the God of the universe. So I guess if it's really going to be summed up, we do this to see and be seen.
So benefits?
Benefits?
Which is a mixed bag after today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Benefits, a greater understanding of myself and an ability to face the things that I didn't want to face, and to see like really ugly and hard truths about myself that I had previously had been like, no, thank you, I'm good. And a truer and deeper understanding of who God says he is, and frankly, why I should care and why that's relevant to me, and why God as Abba, God as the father of the prodigal is so important. I've also gained community, and
Hard to admit, is it?
It is hard to admit. I don't, because it's twofold. You know, we come here, we call it Narnia affectionately, and so we gain all of these things, and we gain these people in this community, and then it doesn't exist outside of this space again in the same iteration that it did. But that being said, I think it also has given me the ability to, and the desire to seek out that kind of community over and over and over again. So it's temporary, but recurring. And like deeply, deeply good. I think that seeing myself, for a long time, I saw myself as I would put it like a cockroach in God's cosmic kitchen. And he was just looking at me like, oh, yikes, gotta get rid of that. Or call the exterminator, whatever. Yeah, right. Smite her. And
you smite her.
Yes. And I can't remember if it was my third or fourth retreat, but I was working through Ruthless Trust, I think, by Brennan Manning. And I had written something about like the prodigal when he came back, like his motives may have been mixed, but at the end of the day, like what he truly did was he trusted his Abba's love for him. And that act of like trust was the hump that I couldn't get over, because I was like, this is all cool and great in theory. This is all like wonderful, you know, in theory, but trusting that it was true was like the next step that I really couldn't get past for a really long time. And the image of like trudging home and like not having anything or any reason really to want to come home except trusting that I would still be loved when I did was what pushed me to maybe I can like come home and maybe I can trust. If the prodigal could do it, maybe I can too. And it was, I hesitate to be, you know, over melodramatic, but life-changing in a lot of ways. And I see that leaking into other parts of my life, into the way that I like choose to relate to other people, in the way that I relate to myself and to clients and all of like my world. It's leaks out that belief that I'm worthy as is, like no ifs, ands, or buts. And I'm still worthy when I don't believe that I am. And it doesn't matter. My belief, God's love and grace is not contingent on my belief in it. It just is.
Yep.
So, and I don't know,
So what parts of it would you want to say? I mean, if there was somebody listening that it's like, I don't know why I need to do something like this. What is the biggest motivation? Because initially, like you said, motivation and grace and love are completely disconnected from one another. But is there something about that you experienced here that other people couldn't see? They can only hear about. You know what I mean?
Something that I experienced here that other people couldn't see. I could only tell them about it and hope that they understood.
Yeah.
I will say somewhat facetiously, because I fell into this category, I think that people who say, why would I need this, are the people who need it the most. Pot, kettle, all of the things.
All the way.
I think transformation. And I think the way that, I don't know. It's hard to put a finger on it other than transformation.
Which we talked about, right? I mean, it's how do you describe an experience that's so profoundly individual that how can you relate it to somebody who comes and they're coming with different stuff?
I mean, I don't think there is a way to do that. I don't think that there's a way to sufficiently, like in our human language, put words to this experience that fully encompasses everything that it is. And I think that's why I write when I'm here, because for me that helps me comprehend it in some ways, and it helps give me language to communicate that to other people. But it's so individual and so personal that I can sit here and say transformation and life-changing and all of these like big, amazing words, but until you've experienced it and know for yourself what those things mean, there's no way to describe it. It defies expectations, completely surpasses any predictions that we could have. And the things that we think, that we come in thinking like, oh, this is what I need to talk about with God. Here's my laundry list of like all my grievances against God and blah, 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 you know.
How many people have come to this retreat doing that, right?
I was one of them. I was one of them. I had my checklist and I had my, screw this is awful.
And there was a list behind that.
And there was a list behind, I had list after list after list. And then truly at the end of the day, I think the best way that I can sum it up, like the whole experience, and this is like open for interpretation, is you are met face to face, unveiled, unmasked, and whatever that means for for you, for that person that comes, that's what it is. But you can't. My personal experience won't dictate somebody else's. But I think that the truth that runs through every single person's experience here is that in some capacity, they were met face to face.
Which can be very unnerving.
Yes. It's terrifying. It's terrifying. And when we take off that veil and, see ourselves in the mirror and allow other people to see the same things that we see, it's terrifying. That's the only word for it. It's petrifying. And you show up and you suddenly you have a face that you're showing to other people, and you're like waiting for the judgment to fall, waiting for someone to declare you guilty, whether that's other people or God or ourselves. We're waiting for that. And then that blow never comes. And it's so confusing. And you sit there and you're like, but wait, like, why aren't you condemning me? Like, this is what I deserve. And then everybody who's here and God, like everything that goes into it is like, no, that's not true. That's not what we're doing. You're not condemned. We're not going to pass judgment on you. You are loved, and you are seen, and you are known. And we call you beloved, and God calls us beloved. And that's like the truth at the heart of it all, is the idea of being, and the truth, the reality of being beloved. And how do we live as though we are, and live within that truth, and carry that out of here even far beyond Sunday.
Yeah, that's so meaningful that you had it inscribed on your arm.
Yes. Yeah. I did.
That's a good reminder.
Yeah. I think that's it. I don't know. I could talk. I tell everybody about this, and I tell them all, I'm like, you should go, you should do it. Just go for a day even. And they're always like,
How about 6 hours?
Yeah, I'm like, just 2 hours, just go and spend the after, but I think that's, if I were going to sum it up, that would be it. So.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, there you have it for, if you add up all of our podcasts that we've done, the traditional version, the audio only, we have 6 different perspectives that have been articulated about the silent retreats, and each one just a little different. Everybody's needs are different. They each have different perspectives about all of this, and so I appreciate their willingness to be guinea pigs for such a thing. But I think there's some value in hearing exactly the kind of impact that any contribution people make to SGI has, and the impact it has on the spiritual development of young people. And in a lot of cases, what we've had students and young adults come into one of these with a significant chip on their shoulder about the church and about Christianity and God. And I'm not saying it completely is gone, but I think it certainly gets loosened a good bit by the community that can be created in a remarkable period of time. Actually, we start meeting on a Thursday night and we leave on a Sunday after lunch, and that's not very much time. And yet they leave changed in a lot of ways, and that's there's no guarantees. People can come and have their hearts entirely closed to God, and it can be a nice rest and retreat, but that's about it. And yet there's still the conversations, there are still the walks, there are still the perspectives shared by others that has a way of weaseling its way into their lives, and that may be the first step back into exploring a relationship with Jesus that is uniquely their own rather than someone else's. It's pretty easy to pick a fight with a God that is somebody else's God, if you want to put it that way, or somebody else's perspective about God, versus forging your own, built on what he reveals about himself in Scripture, and my own particular issues that come into play when I'm trying to relate to a God like that. And so that's what this provides a context for. And I will often say to people that are coming is that you can belong before you ever believe in this. And so just because we're coming to a Jesuit silent retreat house and it has all the trappings of Catholicism and everything else and all the iconography and all the statues and everything else, it's just simply a place that and a space for you that if you're willing to have your heart open to hear what God wants to say and how he wants to meet with you, and it's going to be uniquely for you. It's not going to be for anybody else. And that's what we try to offer. I am not there. Certainly Dr. Saxby is not there. As I said before, we're not there to tell people what to think. We're simply there to facilitate the journey that they're on, and certainly in the process get to know what their journey is like for them, because everybody's a little different. They don't have to be the same. They don't have to have the same potholes in them, and that is in and of itself. You walk away being seen and being known, and maybe invited to know some other people that can be part of your journey as well. So that's it for tonight. I want to remind people that one of the major reasons for me doing these interviews was to let people get a view of what their contributions allow us to do in doing these silent retreats. It is not a cheap undertaking by any stretch of the imagination. And so for young people to generate and find the kind of income to do something like this, which for a whole weekend from Thursday evening to Sunday at lunch is $360. That's a lot of money. And so our purpose with SGI is to raise the kind of funds necessary to make it possible to scholarship people who need it and make it possible for them to attend, even if they can't afford it at all. And that's a mutual commitment, certainly between us and Sacred Heart as well. That's their normal operating policy at Sacred Heart. So we want to be able to make that possible, and your partnership and contributions and donations go a long, long way toward making that possible. So if you're interested and you want to partner with us, you can use the donate button, sgi-net.org/donate, and make a donation. And if it was a recurring one, that would be wonderful. We would be grateful for anything that people want to give to support doing these retreats for young people, to introduce them to Jesus as he is, not as they think he is. So there's that. If you'd rather send, a physical check, you certainly can do that. Just send it to SGI at P.O. Box 322, East Glen, Colorado, 80614, and that would be wonderful as well. So either way, please prayerfully consider if there's any way that you can help us out on that front. A couple other housekeeping announcements. I mentioned in the last podcast that my book was to be released. It was indeed released and can be found on Amazon and on Barnes & Noble and on sgi-net.org. It is listed under the SGI store, and you can make an order there. And as soon as I get a shipment in, I will be sending those out to all the people that are interested. That is a way, certainly, to support the vision and the mission of SGI as well. So there's that. And the other thing, for all you people that are here in the Denver area, coming up on February 10th at 1:30 in the afternoon, we will be having a book launch party on CCU's campus in Leprino Hall, and you are more than welcome to come. You get to hear from my publisher and his observations and thoughts about this book. And I'll be reading a few excerpts from the book that I think are worth taking note of. And then we'll just hang out, eat brownies and cookie bars and anything else that make us fat but are good. And if you want, I'll also sign a book for you as well. if you want that. So that's it, like I said, for tonight. Thanks so much for joining me. And as always, I'll be here waiting for you next time, and love you. Later. Bye.